This is 40K Today, the podcast that's like your personal Jella field against the world. Without it, there's just chaos.
Hello and welcome to 40K Today. This is your daily 15-minute news, views, and interview show that covers the entire hobby of Warhammer 40,000. I'm your host, John Damaris, and today on the program, we meet another Warhammer hero. There are so many people in our community who have stepped up during this tough time all around the world. One of those people is Damien Long, who has turned his hobby skills into making PPE gear for those on the front line of the COVID crisis. And next, we're kicking off a special feature with a brand new addition on the horizon. We go all the way back to the beginning. We get some stories from a man who was there when 40K was born. But first, there's a couple things we need to tell you about. The first thing I need to tell you is if you're one of the many people who entered our Mega 40K prize giveaway, entries have officially closed and winners have already been drawn and emails have gone out. So check your inboxes to see if you won some of the cool prizes that we were giving away. We're also running a poll right now on the 40K Today Facebook page looking for an answer to this question. Do you think the new edition will be able to bring balance to the game? We're getting a massive response with this. Liam says, power creep is kind of a fundamental flaw of the game, unless you release every army's rules at the same time. But I imagine 9th will just be a polishing of 8th, which is a good thing. I agree 100%, Liam. And shout out to Wooden Spoon Wargaming who commented, I don't want a balanced game. No games are ever balanced, even chess, because one side goes first. I'm going to enjoy the next edition for what it is, the continuous journey into the golden age of the hobby that we are currently in. If you want to join the discussion, just look us up, 40K Today on Facebook, and jump in. There's a ton happening on that poll. Okay, on with the show. There's been so much hype around the announcement of the brand new edition of 40K, and even if they're not officially naming it 9th, we have 8 editions so far of the game that was born in 1987. About a year before that, Paul Cockburn took over as the editor of White Dwarf magazine. These days, he lives in New Zealand, not so far away from our own Steve Joel, and the two of them caught up for a chat about history.
Let's start before you even are editing the magazine. What leads you into Games Workshop? How do you get to Games Workshop and start work there? And what sort of time in your life were you at?
So I'm about 24, and the competitor to Games Workshop, a company called TSR, who are behind Dungeons and Dragons, they launched a UK magazine competitor to White Dwarf, and I set up and run that for 3 years.
Right. Okay.
When I leave there, the boss guys at Games Workshop then took me on, not specifically to do White Dwarf. I was there as a kind of project manager, but I quickly ended up doing White Dwarf for. Well, it's a fairly bizarre story that's difficult to do quickly, but I can if you like.
Okay. Well, take as long as you need to do it justice.
Well, it's just this amuses all of those of us who were involved in this story. So Games Workshop, the company, was based in London, UK. Citadel Miniatures, the people that make all the toy soldiers, were and are in Nottingham.
Yes.
So I joined Citadel, but at this time, Citadel is taking over Games Workshop. One of the things they decide to do is they're going to move everything up to Nottingham. There are plans for a big office and factory, all of this sort of gubbins. So literally on my second day, the boss man calls me in and says, we need you to go down to London, collect all of the White Dwarf stuff, see if any of the staff are prepared to move to Nottingham, sort this all out. And I literally, I wasn't even remembering where my desk was by this point. But
wow.
All right, fine. On the train, down to London, hotel, blah, blah, blah. Take the guys who are currently working on White Dwarf out to dinner, and they all go, nah, we're not having it. So literally all I can do is arrange to ship all of the White Dwarf stuff up to Nottingham. And bear in mind, it's a monthly magazine. I can't remember exactly where, but we're somewhere in the cycle of producing the next issue.
Yeah.
So the way it was told to me later is that I'm waiting then up in Nottingham the next week for stuff to arrive, and hardly anything does. Some equipment does, some files and what have you. but no contents, no stuff. And this is because the guy driving the van had parked up somewhere on the M1 and gone, this is all crap, and had thrown it onto the side of the road.
Really?
Yeah. But it meant that we kind of had to reinvent White Dwarf from scratch, because there was no content, no continuity, as it were, from what had gone before. And this is then the beginning of my my story as the man that ruined White Dwarf, because quite literally all we could then do was to put much more focus on the Citadel miniatures side of things. So immediately there's a lot more emphasis on things like painting guides, on army lists for Warhammer Battle, Fantasy Battle. And then we start prefiguring what I know you're obviously interested in, things like Warhammer 40K.
So White Dwarf magazine has since gone on to be this, mainstay really of the whole setup for Warhammer, for Games Workshop, all the way through. And still people look forward to it, and our rules for armies are being produced in White Dwarf. I've heard people are desperately waiting for the next one to come out. What do you make of White Dwarf now as compared with when you were putting it out?
It's the natural evolution of what happened at that time when the London operation was closed down and the Nottingham one started. Because it was a case that Citadel took over Games Workshop, even if the name of the company became Games Workshop, it was a miniatures-based operation from then on. What mattered, even when you were producing games, including 40K, including Warhammer Fantasy Battle, any game at all, was what was that going to do to sales of miniatures? How was that going to drive sales of miniatures? So with that focus, what it meant was that White Dwarf just became part of that operation that said, look, kids, this hobby's really cool. You can turn out your Space Marine regiment looking like this. Here's a painting guide. Here's how it fits into an army list. Now go buy the rule book and have fun.
It's interesting you point out that Citadel took over the business, became the driver of the business. It's a criticism that people post on social media a lot is, oh, they're just trying to sell miniatures. But, yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
People post it as a criticism, but it's not really. It's just a reality. They're trying to sell miniatures. Yeah. And so, yes, of course, everything builds into that. But that doesn't mean we can't have fun along the way and kind of suspend that reality.
Yeah. Games Workshop was essentially, back in the 70s and 80s, was a retail operation with some small-scale publishing tacked on the back of it. That wasn't something that could become the company that people are enjoying today.
Right.
So something was going to give, and the driver was the fact that actually you could make good profits off miniatures, but the only way to make really good profits off miniatures was to have games to hang them on.
Yeah.
Warhammer Battle, Warhammer 40K, both are engines to drive miniature sales, but that doesn't mean that they're not loved and fun products in their own right.
That was Steve Joel with Paul Cockburn, the third editor of White Dwarf magazine. He has so many stories to tell that we're going to continue this with part 2 of their chat in tomorrow's show. Today's episode of 40K Today is brought to you by Frontline Gaming. Frontline Gaming is a one-stop shop for all your Warhammer hobby needs, discounted products, American-made gaming mats and terrain, and a full line of miniatures painting service and daily hobby content. And this can all be found at frontlinegaming.org. Not all heroes wear capes. Sometimes someone steps into a void and really feels the need, and we should celebrate that. Damien Long saw that there was a real shortage of personal protective equipment for those on the front line in the early days of the pandemic. He has been 3D printing, for a while now, and turned all his machines into making PPE and delivered over 3,300 reusable masks for frontline workers. 40K Today's John Damaris, which is me, I guess, sat down with Damien to hear this inspiring story. Damien, before we get started, first let me say you are a true inspiration and hero, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. So cheers to you, fella. I really, really appreciate it. But why don't you tell everybody sort of what was the impetus and how you got started and what you're doing? Because I guess maybe I didn't exactly say that to start. So
yeah, sure, no worries. So I have been 3D printing miniatures and terrain and props and stuff for about a year now. And when the COVID-19 virus hit, I realized pretty quickly that there was a lack of PPE locally for frontline workers. So I stuck up a quick post on my Facebook page and just basically said to friends and family, if anyone wants any of these face shields that I was able to produce, let me know. Ended up just having a massive outcry from all the large local hospitals, ambulance service, care homes, pretty much all the the medical profession locally. So essentially, moved very quickly to start building these things. I actually fired up a GoFundMe page, and within 24 hours, managed to get £2,000 in there, which allowed me to really ramp things up. So yeah, through the 3 weeks of last month, the first 3 weeks, I managed to produce and donate 3,381 face shields for frontline NHS workers in the UK, which from the printers that were basically doing terrain and props beforehand. So it was it was a major upscale.
That's amazing, and we'll definitely put a link to the GoFundMe. Is it still running? If
No, I
people want to
closed it
donate,
down as soon as I'd had enough to get the materials. Obviously, there's no point in keeping it running.
gotcha.
Um, but yeah, as soon as I'd had enough of the materials, yeah, that money essentially allowed me to upscale and go to major plastic manufacturers to get thicker, stronger sheeting for the front lenses, which essentially meant they were 2.5 times thicker than anything else that was currently available, even at cost.
Yeah,
So yeah,
so you donated 3,300 some odd
yeah,
face masks for frontline workers. That's incredible. And if people haven't seen these face masks, they're the full like clear plastic shields that
yeah.
cover the entire, so they're very protective, right? They do a good job.
Yeah, sure. I mean, they were signed off by infection control at both our large local hospitals and by the ambulance service. They were cleaned with alcohol and chlorine dips between usage, so they were able to be reused rather than thrown away, which is a big win at the moment with the lack of PPE that is available for those workers. It does seem now that major manufacturing has started to speed up, which probably should have happened 8 weeks ago or so, but I know there's companies out there now that are now able to produce these en masse, which is great. But there's only a certain amount of the material in the UK supply chain, so that's now been diverted as it should have been to people that can now manufacture these things en masse. So I think it's starting to drip through, which is good news. But it wasn't just myself. There's the whole 3D printing community sort of turned on this, and there are a lot of people globally that are doing a very similar thing.
It's
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 yeah.
always really fun to see how people come together in times of crisis. And dude, I actually have legitimately have goosebumps right now just listening to your story. It's so inspiring. I mean, I just it's awesome to see good people doing good things for good reasons, right? Because
Yeah,
you don't
sure.
you don't always get the crossroads of all of those things. But just let me say from my heart, dude, thank you. Like that is legitimate heroic stuff, dude. Like it
No
is.
worries, man.
Well,
It was a pleasure to do it, and it was hard work. We were doing so it's up to 18-hour days building and constructing them, and the printers were running 24 hours a day solidly for over 3 weeks at maximum speed with super wide nozzles on, so they're running significantly faster and with bigger kit than I'd normally use for miniatures or anything like that. Which came with its own problems. But yeah, it was good. We managed to produce some serious numbers and hopefully help people locally. So that's all you can do.
you know, that kind of impact can't be underestimated because you're literally protecting over 3,000 people or helping protect them because, like you said, there was a major PPE shortage because obviously no one predicted the pandemic was going to hit
Cool.
the way it did, right? Like, and your quick action probably saved lives. So that's something that's pretty cool. It must make you feel very proud.
Yeah, it was a good thing to do. No, it was I was paid. I was actually made redundant just before this happened. I know a lot of people have gone through the same thing. So I had a bit of time on my hands. I basically wasn't sure when I'd be able to pick up the next job, which thankfully I've now managed to do. Um, but yeah, I had a bit of time on my hands and a few 3D printers, so I thought, why not?
Yeah. Well, not all heroes wear capes, but Damien, thank you for your service to the world and to your local community, and have a great day.
Thank you. Cheers, mate. Thanks for having me on.
Wow, what a great story. That was Damien Long, and we look forward to having him back on the show to talk about more fun stuff like 3D printing scenery and models maybe, and look forward to that. Okay, folks, it's that special time of the show. Let's get pumped for Model of the Day.
It's the model of the day, the model of the day, the model of the day.
The Castellan, painted by Reddit user 2 Dorks 1 Brush, is a study in perfect creamy blends. They have achieved a look that is reminiscent of light coming through water, and it's a unique look that we haven't seen anywhere else. Couple that with the amazing color palette of purples, blues, and golds, as well as a beautiful lens effect, and you have a mini, basically, that must be seen to believe. So come on over to our Facebook or Instagram to take a look at this Castellan, not to be confused with the Castellan Knight. We're talking about the Castellan robot. It is a beautiful model, and the colors will really sing to you, I promise. That being said, if you have a model that you want us to feature on the show, or you've seen one, let us know. We're always looking for cool stuff to highlight, and we know that the hobby is huge. There's tons of cool stuff out there. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us. A big thanks to our content producer, Alex Boehner, our social media ace, Tanya Gates, and our technical producer, Seamus Ronlin, for all their hard work in putting this program together. If you have anything you think we should feature on the show, please get in touch. If you got an amazing army or a YouTube channel or a great hobby trip, contact us via Facebook or just search 40K Today. And make sure you join us tomorrow on the show when I meet head judge of the world's biggest tournament, Adam Solis, and I ask, why would anyone want that job? We'll see you all tomorrow. Until then, for the 40K Today team, I'm John Damaris, and that's what's happening in 40K Today.